I started my own school. He stole a lot of money from us, so I naturally left. And I wasn't done with it, so I wanted to start my own school. And I took so much flack for that, Rob. I'll tell you, like, I had people showing up at my door challenging me, you have no right. And it was a Filipino martial art. First of all, you're a woman. Secondly, you're white. And third, you're overweight. And when I work with people, self-sabotage is one of the number one things. And when I start working with someone, I'm like, what are the 3 things that you want to change in your life? And it can be anything. And it's always the same things.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Odyssey podcast, where we tell stories and listen to stories of entrepreneurs and their journeys. And today I have with me Laura Armstrong, who is operating CEO. I don't know. We'll let her talk a little about that. Leadership with Laura and Breakthroughs by Laura. Did I say that right?
Yeah, you got it.
All right, perfect. Tell us a little bit about what those mean.
Yeah, for sure. I've always had an entrepreneurial mindset, Rob. I worked as a commodities trader for over 30 years and did international logistics. And I liked my full-time job, but it was mind-numbing at some point, and I always had something on the side. And until I got into my 40s where I was feeling confident about my skills, and at that time I was a holistic practitioner for over 20 years. At that point, I wanted to take that business full-time, and I was done with the corporate because you can't choose the people you work with, and most of them were jerks, right? Like I was the only woman in a very male-dominated office, very high-level boys club. That was 20, 30 years ago, and it still exists today, but I just didn't want to do it for the rest of my life, and it ended up that they packaged me out in a really bad way, and I took them to court for a lot of money, which was awesome because they paid me out, which I loved. So I decided that I wanted to do this full time. I was only going to do things that I loved, that helped people and made me loads and loads of money. That was my life from that point on. And I am a 3-time world champion martial artist. I've been training for over 30 years. I have 3 world titles, and my students have world titles, and so do their students. So I was able to create 2 legacies, one in my school and one in my holistic business. And I thought there's something here for people, right? Because I've learned all of this stuff, and how can I structure it in a way that will help other people do that in their business? So I created Leadership with Laura, which are training programs that you can take with me to level up your leadership. And in turn, what happens is you level up your influence and your impact, and therefore your income. And then the other business that I just started recently because of COVID, I was finding like people needed the extra step of touch. They wanted that more personal touch. They just needed more from you as an entrepreneur. So I started Breakthroughs by Laura, and that's a custom program where it's holistic business development, where I advise you what to do. We break through what's holding you back in your business, because I see the same things over and over. Self-sabotage, I'm not good enough, I'm not worth what I charge, I don't know what to do, all those stories. You hear it over and over again, right? I started doing that, and I gotta tell you, that is bringing me a lot of joy. Everything I do brings me joy, but this really, seeing people, I had last week one of my clients shoot me a text with a screenshot of her PayPal account, and she just got in $10,000 worth of business.
Wow.
And so we'd been working together like almost 9 months, and there was a lot of stuff that she worked through that she wasn't even aware of until we started talking about things. So that's like more the like woo-woo side of things, which I love too. So it's a good balance. So yeah, that's like in a nutshell.
All right. That's, first of all, amazing. World champion 3 times. What led you to that? When did you start, and where did that go? Tell us that story a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good story. So when I was 18, so first of all, I was always kind of like the overweight kid in school. I would be bullied, and there was a lot of circumstances around that as I grew older, and I had a lot of trauma and stuff like that. When you're in school, kids don't care about that. Like, they're brittle, right?
Yeah.
So I grew up with that, which in its own way made me a really strong person. My French would come out and say you, like in school, and I would get in trouble a lot, right? I was always like the catalyst for change. I was willing to be out there, get in trouble, make things happen. And in school, the structure of the way school is built, it's not built for people like me. Because you're seen as a troublemaker, and you're really not. You just have a strong personality, and you know what you want, right? So when I got out of school, I decided to work. Decided not to go to university because high school was such a bad experience for me. I didn't need 4 more years of bad experience. Not that it was going to be, but I just wanted to go out and work and make money. because I have a really good relationship with money.
Yeah.
And I thought in school, I always loved phys ed. I scored really high in it. Even though I was overweight, I was always an overachiever. I always got really high marks, more high than the fit people, which really bugged them. So anyways, what I did is take this continuing education course in Aikido. But even before that was in my mid 20s, after I got out of high school, I started doing powerlifting and bodybuilding. And I always liked the idea of women having strength in their bodies and having that reflect in their mind. And so I worked myself up to where I won the provincial championships in both categories. And I was scouted by international coaches. And the one thing they said to me is, if you want to go to the next level and we want to train you internationally, because when I would diet down, you could see like the muscle. It was like I had the genetics. And they're like, you're going to have to take the drugs. And I'm like, because that was just the reality at that time. And this was like 40 years ago, right? 30, 40 years ago. And I said, sorry, I think it was like 19 years old. I'm like, I'm not doing that. This is the rest of my life. And on women, I don't know if those things are not reversible, right? Like male hormones, if you have too much of them, you can't, anyways, now it's a whole different story because we have so much more nowadays. It's the norm, right?
Yep.
So and at that point I was sick of working out in the gym. I'd pretty much seen it all. I worked out at a gym where there were a lot of celebrities, and I trained a lot of people. And I just decided I wanted to do something different. And I was always interested in martial arts. I loved action movies. I love fighting. I love all of it, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a martial art. So the continuing education courses they have at night, I got the pamphlet. I'm like, oh, there's Aikido. Let's do that. So I sign up for the Aikido course and I show up, and it's this little tiny woman. She's 4 foot nothing. She comes up to my armpit, and she's got her gi on with her hakama, which is like the skirt, and her black belt. And I'm like, oh, cool. I want one of those. And so she's teaching us the art of Aikido, which is stepping off the line. I know none of this. I think we're there for kicking and punching. So she goes into this Zen explanation about Aikido, how it's the art of peace and stepping off the line and redirecting your partner's energy. And I'm like, huh, that sounds pretty boring. I don't know if I want to do this. So we get through the class. We're learning how to roll, do basic stances, the things you would normally learn when you start something new. And so at the end of the class, she asks the class, she says, does anybody have any questions? And of course, my hand goes up and I'm like, yeah, when are we getting to the kicking and punching? And so you could just see like her face was like, oh, one of those, right? And so she goes through this whole explanation of how Aikido is the art of peace and blah, 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 right? And there must have been something around what she said, because I joined and I did 2 or 3 sessions in the continuing education. And back in those days, you had to be invited to a school to participate. You just couldn't show up like it is now and pay your membership. So you needed a private invitation. So I eventually got invited to participate in her school. And 30 years later, I was about to get my 5th Dan, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And I had a motorcycle accident, so I had to shift my practice there. About 2 or 3 years into my Aikido training, I did other arts like karate, hapkido, like other arts. And then I had this guy come and do a demo at one of my classes, and he was a weapons specialist. And I always love weapons. So weapons, not in the sense of guns, because in Canada, it's a little bit different. It's more edged weapons, edged and impact weapons, anything bladed, anything blunt. So I really liked what he taught, and I went to his school and I started taking classes from him. And I was with him for 10 years before I left him, and I started my own school. He stole a lot of money from us, so I naturally left, and I wasn't done with it, so I wanted to start my own school. And I took so much flack for that, Rob. I'll tell you, I had people showing up at my door challenging me. You have no right. And it was a Filipino martial art. First of all, you're a woman. Secondly, you're white. And third, you're overweight. So you have no right to do this. I'm just like, yeah, whatever. I'd been over to the Philippines a few times to train with teachers over there, and I take my students there every few years. So wasn't just doing the art, I was embedding the culture in what I do. So I opened my school in 2003, and it's still open today. My student runs it. We just had our 20th anniversary. And so that's been my journey in martial arts, and it's been a lot of hardship, but a lot of reward. Seeing my students surpass me is really the key for me, and I've translated that into my business, right? Because we're the best at what we do, but the people that we're working with should always be better than us, right? And so
Yeah.
I always maintain that as I go through in my business. And just a story about the motorcycle, because I know you want to know. So my husband and I were riding, and it happened near my home. And this SUV ran a stop sign as I was going and hit me in the back of the bike. And so my bike went like that, and I went down. And so I had separated ribs. I had not life-threatening injuries because I was fully geared up in leathers and the whole bit. And I remember getting into the ambulance, and it's these two ladies who are like my age, and they're like, "Do you know how much road rash we pull off the road because of people who aren't geared up properly?" And they're like, "We're so happy to see you're okay." And I wasn't okay because I still have injuries today, but it was really an understanding of experiencing the accident and what's really important to me. I did have some ahas about that. And so, anyways, after that, it was just too painful for me to train in Aikido. I could stand and I could be on the floor, but the up and down was what was killing my back from the injury. So I did have to step off the mat. So the one thing that I love about that is when you train in Aikido, it actually develops you internally. But I'm telling you, Rob, you don't realize it until you're not on the mat. And I had that epiphany. I still train in Filipino martial arts to this day and teach, but it was just really interesting. And so that's been my journey. And I'm retired from fighting, obviously, but I still love the fights. Yeah. And I take a piece of that and all those principles into my business with me. And so it's been really a chance to cultivate that in a different environment for people so they can be the best at what they do.
Well, I'm sure a lot of the mental toughness and not only that, but the entrepreneurial spirit that you seems like you've had your whole life. Would you say that entrepreneurial spirit that you have was an effect of some of the bullying and things like that, or do you think more of the bullying was more an effect from the kind of entrepreneurial spirit that you had?
That's a good question. I think it's a bit of both. I was brought up in a family, I had a lot of trauma as a young person and a child, but I was brought up in a family, I will say this for them, they never held me back. And it was never, you can't do this or that. Like they were my mother was very strong, right? And so that was a good model for me in that way. But I was always thinking, how could I create more from something? How could, it be better? How could I do it differently? And not everybody likes that. People who are in their lane, that's like the opposite of what they want to hear. And a lot of time the education system, that's where they sit in their lane. And so I would say that being bullied probably pushed me more into it that I knew that I didn't want to be like those people who were bullying me. Right. And so I
Right.
wasn't going to allow that to happen. But as I got older, it shifted back the other way. I'm more entrepreneurial because of the way that I was treated, because it just gave me that extra bit in my spirit to like, no, I'm not giving up. I'm never giving up. I remember training for the World Championships, and it was a 9-month journey. And so you would start at month 1 and you would do diet, you would do weightlifting, you do weights, you do gym, you do cardio, you do training, sometimes 3, 4, 5, 6 hours a day, right? And you do this and you build for 9 months to 3 days where you're going to peak and you're going to fight at your best. And you're never going to run out of gas, because when you run out of gas, that's why you lose. And so
Right.
you train your mind and you do visualizations. And a lot of this, like I said, translates into business. And yeah, I'm pretty mentally tough that way. I never give up. I never give up.
Yeah. We have some of a similar story in just that I was bullied when I was younger, but not because I was overweight, because I was young. I was underweight. I was a little guy that I think people could look at and take advantage of. And I don't understand it. I remember walking down the hall one day and there's some guy walking this way, and just looked up at him, and he just came over and started punching me. I don't even know the guy. I have no idea what that was about. But I ended up going into martial arts, just kind of learned to protect myself. That gave
Hmm.
me a bit of confidence to know that I don't have to take this if I don't want to, kind of thing. And it was an interesting point in my life, which I don't think it led to my entrepreneurial attitude either. Again, we share similar stories at school. Just I hated it. Just I did not like bells telling me when I had to be where and what I had to do, and the lectures, and just to me it felt like a waste of time. There was I could learn so much faster than what the teachers could teach me, and I think all children out there can learn so much more quickly. So it's interesting how some of these things, this entrepreneurial spirit and some of the bullying, can lead people like you and me to become stronger and think outside the box. And not only that, but I really do think it plays a role in our desire to help other people to achieve greatness.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there because really, if those things didn't happen to me, if you think about almost every single famous person, they've gone through some massive trials and tribulations to get where they are. So their spirit was pushed to the edge and beyond, and they managed to survive it. It may not have always been the best way, whether through drugs or whatever, but they come out on the other side or they just don't make it, right? It's just that simple, right? They give up or whatever, they die or whatever. But it's true. I feel like, yeah, like it can be what you want it to be. And being relentless has it's sometimes it's too much for people. I come on too strong for some people. And I've really, depending on the crowd that I'm in, this last weekend when we were training, I came on a little too strong on my intro. And I looked at my mentor and she's like, just bring it down a little bit. But it was a good gauge, like it's something I'm working on all the time, but I'm willing to be seen and heard. And if people don't like, that's okay. The more comments I get negatively, in a way, it's good for me because it means I'm making a difference and
Yeah,
they
absolutely.
don't like what I'm doing. Yeah,
I remember there was a speaking seminar we would go through and we would do seminars, and one of the speakers was very controversial, I would say, in some of his speaking, although he wasn't trying to be rude or unrealistic or irresponsible. He would just tell people like it was, and some people would get up and they would just leave the room because they just couldn't handle his straightforwardness and some of the things he was saying. But at the end of the presentation, he would just be surrounded by people who just wanted to shake his hand and have him help them because, and he said, this is what he said, you have to turn some people off to turn other people on.
yeah, and basically that's exactly what I do. I push people out of that comfort zone of normal, and I've had people walk away. I've had to divorce clients, right?
Yeah.
Because they're not going to move. And I'm like, okay, so you need to go find, oh, no, they're comfortable with me. I'm like, no, that's not the type of people I work with. And you're right. You are going to turn people off. And to me, you have to be okay with that. And you have to be confident enough to know that your message for you resonates with you and why it resonates and what it's going to give to others. And if you're not at that place, you need to get to that place.
Yeah. Let's look at some parallels here. What was, let's say, your fiercest competitor in the ring? And then we'll look at your fiercest competitor in life and how they are similar.
For sure. So my fiercest competitor in the ring was a Philippine woman who won the championship from me one year. Like it took me 8 years to win my first gold. And then I went back 10 years later and I won two more golds just to see if I could do it. And so the fiercest competitor would be that woman. And I'll never forget because after the end of the fight, when she won and she disarmed me, she disarmed my weapon. And so she got the point. And that was 1 point. She won by 1 point. You don't think I think about that a lot?
I bet you do.
Right? But she came over to me and she hugged me and she said, "Congratulations, that was a really good fight." And she said, "Thank you so much for the opportunity." And I was like, this is the type of person I want to fight because they don't give it away. They're not like I always had to fight for it. Like I remember when I started, there were no women, so I would have to fight the men, right? I was like, okay. And they went in there and they would take it easy on me. I'm like, that's pretty dumb because I'm coming for you. And I would walk away with all these medals and they'd be mad. And I'm like, you knew the rules from the start. So I would have to say she was my fiercest competitor because we both wanted it. She wanted it for her country and it was in the Philippines where we were fighting. And she was just a really good competitor. It's one of my best fights. Another fierce competitor that I had, this was earlier on in my career and I did lose to her as well. And she was from Denmark, I want to say, and she was on steroids but they were not testing.
Hmm.
So I ended up with the silver in that fight, the silver championship, but she won. But she came up to me after and she said, "You really hit hard." She said, "I thought it was going to be a draw." And so the other competitor appreciated the fight as much as I did, even
Right.
losing. So I love that. Yeah.
It is amazing how much we love the fight. And I think as people in business, a lot of times we self-sabotage because we want that challenge for some weird reason. I have a book, I don't know if you've written a book, but I wrote a book called Driven to Succeed, and in it I talk about how people need to progress and how challenge is so important to us. If we golfed and we got a hole in one every time and we went bowling, we got a strike every time, we'd be bored. This is a stupid
So
game.
true.
We
Yeah.
have to have that challenge to make it fun.
I learned far more from losing than I ever did from winning. So I'm so
Yeah.
glad I lost so much at the beginning because I would take my tapes and I would watch them. Like, what do I need to do? And like, I'd be there with my teacher and he's like, okay, well, he said, actually, the fight looked pretty even. So it would have been a judge call at that point. But I'm like, no, my feet are wrong. I got to move here. I got to do this. So I'd always be analyzing what I could do better. Right. But I had to feel it. I had to feel what was going on. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I think you're right. And when I work with people, self-sabotage is one of the number one things. And when I start working with someone, I'm like, what are the three things that you want to change in your life? And it can be anything. And it's always the same things. And I'm like, and then we start to talk about that. I'm like, okay, why did you say that? And I make them write out why, because most of the time they don't know why. And then what they realize is they're in this cycle that they can't get out of. And they keep going through it and through it until we decide where in the cycle they want to break it and how we're going to do that and how to get rid of that stuff that's been holding them back. It's just a fascinating process. I think humans are fascinating, and there's so many similarities between everything we do in life and our business. It's so true. Yeah.
How much of someone's ability to win in business do you think is more outside versus more internal? Is it all
100%
internal, or
for
are there
me.
some things that just externally make it difficult?
Though you can change those things. For me, it's 100% in the head. And having one, I know what it is. And it's funny, I had an operation last year and I had to go on a 40-day liquid diet. My most
Sounds no
vivid
fun.
nightmare come true, right? Like,
No
could it
fun.
get any worse? And so I really needed to do this. I paid a lot for this operation. And I'm like, I'm going to do this, right? And it really was mind over body, right? And I'm like, I just had to get it in my head that I'm going to do this. And the consequences that came out of that were so great. Like the benefits were so amazing. And so it's like my life is like that. So for me, it's 100% in your head. Anything physically, I can always find another, there's something else, right? But this up here, that you can't change that unless you choose. So that's how I feel
How,
about it.
how much of your drive just comes from your desire to win, and how do you instill that in your clients?
For me, I think that so a lot of the time what I see with my clients is they don't know what they want. So they have to want something badly enough to win it, right?
Important. Yep.
And so once we get clear on what that is, then I make them tell me what are the 5 reasons that you want to win it and are they big enough? So what are the 5 reasons and why are those your reasons? Digging down is really the key to things because it gets people thinking and then you're going to see very clearly where those blocks are and what's holding them back. And a lot of the time, I'll tell you, Rob, it's our childhood. It's our parents, it's the people who are around us. Because if you think about it, when you're younger, the adults in your life, their job is to instill their values with you. And some of those values are not always so great. Money, mindset, giving, receiving, all those things that, we can explode our lives with. And some of those are in a very poverty mindset in a lot of people that we're with. I know with my family it was, right? We lived in an upper middle class house and my mom had a poverty mindset, right? So it doesn't really matter your surroundings, it's what's up here, right? So I wasn't going to take that into my life. But most of the time, we don't realize these things that have happened to us until we start thinking about it. And so what we do is I do a timeline with my clients and we go back and we look at, and I don't self-sabotage. I'm like, how much you almost had the opportunity to make 50K last night in that deal, and then you called it off. What happened? Nothing, right? And so it's interesting because we have the automatic block, right? And so being able to actually get rid of those things and see our reality of how great we are, it can be very scary for people. And so you need to be there for them. You need them to know it's okay, whatever they do, and not be in judgment of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is amazing how many times we'll take something outside and internalize it and say, the reason that didn't work or that wouldn't work is because of his attitude, or we just weren't a
right.
good fit. And really, it's a lack of faith in yourself.
You just laid it out there. It really is a lack of faith in yourself. And where does that come from? Who did what to you or what happened to you that happened? And I had one client I was working with, and he just couldn't embrace his business. He would work so hard, and that's what I see over and over again. Probably you the same. People work so hard for so little money, and then they just feel disappointed, right? And I'm like, where's that coming from? Why don't you think you're worth it? And he goes, I don't know. And I'm like, yes, you do. And I said, who said what to you at what age that you shut down like that? And literally within 5 seconds, he said, when my brother was stillborn, my mom blamed me.
Weird.
And there it is.
Yep.
And there it is. And she continued to blame. And she's done it for 40 years in his marriage. He was on the rocks. He was divorced. And there is where it all stemmed from. And so we were able to get rid of that. And all of a sudden, everything went like that.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was
Amazing.
crazy. And so it can just be something as simple as that, because we value and respect our parents so much that, not that parents are bad or anything, that we take that to heart, right? And we carry it with us when it's actually not ours, it's theirs.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's interesting. I was reading a book. I think it was one of these books I picked up from like a Scientology kiosk or something, and I didn't know that's what it was.
Right.
But they were talking about these engrams, and I think that's the word they used, that are somewhere locked in our brain that we may not even have access to, but it limits us in some way because it's something that happened that's in our subconscious that's just telling us we can't when, we really can. And that you found that in that person, that your client, where they just said, my mom blamed me because wow, you would never put that together unless you really think back and think hard about, and a lot of times it's just kind of lost. What would you say to someone in business right now who's just lost the desire to win? They want to win, they know they need to be successful, they're just feeling drained and defeated. How do you get off that
Yeah,
and get
so there's two things that going on there. So the first one is they're not doing what they love, like hands down. And secondly, I would sit with them and I'd say, okay, let's go over everything that you do, and I make a list of it. And then I would say, what do you like to do for your hobbies? What's your passion in your hobbies? If you could do 3 or 4 things. And then I'd be, okay, what are the 5 things out of what you told me you do, or 3 things that you told me out of what you do that you love the most? What really pushes your buttons? And I can guarantee you it's not going to be what they're doing now. I've
Because if they
always wanted,
loved it and
they'd be,
and they got up in the morning and they were just so excited to do what they love, it's a different story.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like part of my problem, and I don't really think it's a problem, but it makes me nuts, is I want to do so many things. Like I'm starting an international defense certification course with Achieve University, and I'm so excited about that. But I'm also excited about my leadership and my breakthroughs. And so I'm excited about a lot of things. And so for me, sometimes I take a lot of flack because I am a multi-entrepreneur, and people are like, no, you have to do one thing. I'm like, why? Are you like in charge of me? No. I serve these people and I serve these people. And why are these people any different than these people? They just want something different. And I'm an expert at that. So why wouldn't I give that to them? So when I hear that and I take a lot of flack and I'm like, do you have just one thing you're genius at? Because if you are, great, go with it. I'm genius at a lot of things and I don't hide that. I don't bury it and I don't pretend it's not there. And
Yeah.
living your reality can be a challenge because there are people who are going to try and push you down. And I like that because I'm like, yeah. I'm like, you want to get in the ring? No, I'm just kidding. But it's just, you got to get to a point where you don't really care what other people think. And that takes a long time because as human beings, we care what people think. It was funny. I was working with one of my mentors and he said, what's your number? I'm like, what do you mean, what's my number? He goes, what would I have to pay you to not care what people think? And my number was pretty high. It was like $100,000. He goes, so if I give you $100,000, you'd be okay with it? I'm like, yeah, because then I'm like, screw you. I don't care what you think. And now there is no number for me now because I just don't care.
Right.
My number's
Yeah.
0. But it's a good way to gauge like how much you really are worried about what other people think. And you can actually use that number as a tool to bring people's perspective about themselves down. Yeah.
So if people wanted to get in touch with you and have you coach them, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, I guess I do coach. I call myself like a holistic business development advisor, right? Coaching, I think, is an overused word, but they can reach me in a couple ways. First of all, my email is laura.y.armstrong@gmail.com. Okay. Or you can go on either of my websites and contact me. So that would be leadershipwithlaura.com or breakthroughsbylaura.com. Okay. And I'll send you all my info, Rob, and then you can push it out to your group if you want. Please reach out to me, even if you want to just have a quick call and talk about what's bugging you. And I'd love to hear more about you. So it's really important. And then if you decide that might be a good fit, we can talk about that. But mostly just call me up. I love to hear more about you and what you do.
I feel if someone wants to have that winning attitude and they feel like they've kind of lost that edge, you talk to a three-time world champion and how to win.
Right. Yeah, I am. And the other thing that we didn't really have time to talk about is like you need to own your greatness, man. Like it's just, and it takes time, right? Look what you do. Like you are an amazing marketing person. We have had several conversations and I'm just amazed at what you do. So if you're not reaching out to Rob about marketing, you should be, right? So don't forget that as well, because I think it's just as important. And I hate doing marketing, and that's why I love Rob.
Couldn't agree with you more. And I appreciate you taking the time to meet with us and give us a little bit of advice. And I will surely get this podcast up. I'll send the link to you too so you can
Great.
promote it to the people that
Love
you
that.
know. And we'll have to do this again sometimes. I'm sure there's lots more of the story that we can cover.
Sure. Yeah, I'll come and I'll tell you some of my martial arts stories. It'll be good.
Oh, sounds awesome. Okay, we'll do it.
Thanks so much, Rob. Really appreciate you.
You bet. Thank you.